You listen to the Vinny Eastwood Show. The somewhat operatic 2 hours of talk radio right here on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And as I mentioned earlier, please download those Android and iPhone apps. And if you can, email American Freedom Radio at ymail.com if you want to volunteer at the network, or if you wish to give them a donation for all the work that they do here, keeping the engines running. You know, do it now. American Freedom Radio at ymail.com. They need your help, actually, at this particular point in time, a lot more than I particularly do. So if you're going to donate to either one of us, but you can't pick which, pick American Freedom Radio. I'm serious about that. Andy Basiago is my guest, and we had two questions in the chat room that I would like you to address. Firstly, how does the time travel technology or teleportation technology actually work? And two, is it dangerous? Like, are there associated health effects? Because there's a simple a film come out recently called Looper. I don't know if you've heard this or seen it, but it's relatively interesting how they use time travel technology, the criminal element in the future, use time travel technology in order to send people who they're knocking off, whacking as it were, back in time to be executed in the past, and their bodies burned and completely disappeared. It's the perfect crime.
Well, the second part of your question goes to the redo involving of a timeline involving time travel from the future to the past. So let me just quickly address that first in light of Looper. Based on everything I experienced in Project Pegasus with different times of time travel, the cardinal principle we have to remember about interventions in a past event that are launched from a time traveler coming from the future is that those interventions occur in real time in the present of the past event that we're visiting and become part of the past that existed when we left the future to make that nonlinear transept back to that location on the linear timeline. So that's why I say that you can't go back to change the past. You can't, or a past event scenario. You can only go back to fulfill it, right? Because it happened when the past was the present. It's in the time-space continuum. Okay, so the notion of a redo, I actually have been defending this position because it's what I was experiencing in the program. I lost a major lecture date recently because my host wanted me to talk about the redo concept. You can't redo the past. You can influence past events, however. So, for example, when I was sent to Gettysburg on November 19th of 1863 from a time lab in East Hanover, New Jersey in the spring of 1972, to have the privilege of seeing Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address, which I ended up screwing up, and I didn't see Mr. Lincoln on that time probe, nor his address. I was there the day Lincoln was there because that's the day they sent me to via a technology called plasma confinement. Okay, so that's why I'm in the famous Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg, because I was sent there that day. Now, when I was sent there, did I create a second timeline where suddenly I was in the Cobb image? In other words, before I jumped from spring of 72 back to fall of 1863, was there a version of the Cobb image that had been circulating for almost a century, for 98 years, without me in it? No, because I was sent there from the future on the same day that Lincoln was there. Okay, so there is no redo of the same timeline that you're leaving to go back to the past because you're already implicated in its effects. Now, you can go back and change events and conditions, but they become the past that existed when you left to change it. So that's essentially another way of addressing the grandfather paradox. Okay, you're implicated in the past being the very past you want to change. It already exists. Okay. Now, your other questions I think are more provocative because they go to teleportation and the potential we have here to introduce voidal teleportation in our generation. What the Tesla teleporter at Curtiss-Wright was doing, I can give you the information that I was told that I know. I'm not a physicist, but I can describe what I was told. I was told that Nikola Tesla had discovered a form of energy that he called radiant energy that he never publicly demonstrated. It was not the ball lightning that he was throwing around his apartment when luminaries like Mark Twain and Andrew Carnegie were coming by and John Singer Sargent. It was a technology that he kept secret. It is a technology that is both latent and pervasive in the physical universe, and that when Tesla found a way to draw it out of the universe, out of the ether, as it were, he discovered, even going back to his famous stay at Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899, that this form of energy has, as its inherent capability, the capacity to bend the fabric of time-space. The device itself that was found in his papers consisted of these two elliptical-shaped objects in which radiant energy was being broadcast between the two armatures. And inside the interior, the concave interior of the two booms, there were these tiny little portals of light in which a bluish-green light could be seen squiggling across the field of radiant energy. The field of radiant energy itself looked like, if you went up to about a foot away from it, looked like the black and white snow pattern, which we call raster on a television set. But if you went back about, let's say, 8 to 10 feet and looked at the field of radiant energy, it kind of looked luminous, sort of like water falling in a public sculpture, a water sculpture. It was actually fairly beautiful, I would say. And when we jumped through that field of radiant energy, the pressure differential between the time-space continuum and that layer of energy, in other words, that field of energy that had been laid in front of us, caused us to punch a tunnel through the time-space continuum. It was bluish-white in color. When you looked to your left or right, you saw intervening events rapidly going by you holographically, and you would very quickly see a pinpoint of light at the end of the tunnel. I remember sometime in the tunnel itself, we felt like we were going at a very great rate of speed.
So was it anything comparable to, say, the Stargate scene in 2001, A Space Odyssey?
I would say the closest that we've seen in mainstream media depicting it would maybe be the teleportation effect in Sliders. In other words, opening up a tunnel in time-space and then having, essentially, according to the theory of relativity, at that point, you're going through a tunnel in time-space and the rest of the universe is being pulled past you. You're basically creating a hole in the time-space continuum, what physicists would call a null field. And the question then is, how do you breathe in a null field? Is it a vacuum? Well, it wasn't a vacuum because we were in it and because we had pushed in enough air to get a couple breaths of air that our bodies had pushed in front of us, and then that would dissipate. In fact, my dad explained that when they first set up one of these Tesla devices after the guy accidentally teleported to Africa and then started using Navy enlisted personnel to test the attributes and tried to adjust the teleporter, the first 3 Navy enlisted personnel asphyxiated because they opened up too long of a tunnel for the amount of oxygen that they had pushed into the Vortal tunnel with their bodies. So the best explanation I can give, because I'm not a physicist, and I readily admit that, I'm simply a time travel experiencer who is a lawyer and a public figure or activist.
Well, so on that basis, if I were to ask you mechanically how this worked, you wouldn't be able to tell me because you were a child and you don't possess the technical training to replicate such technology anyway, would you? No,
I can't give, for example, what the interior of the armatures was, but I can describe the locations where the teleporters were. And by the way, I found witnesses to the teleporter at Curtiss Wright, and I also received information from government insiders about the existence of the program. So as president, I wouldn't be physicist in chief. I think that honor would go to somebody like maybe Thomas Jefferson. You know, I don't get up every morning like Jefferson and take the temperature and pressure, and put it in my journal. I'm not a scientist, but I would basically order the General Accounting Office to find the technology and set it up in a lab in Washington where I could take, somebody like Energy Secretary Dr. Brooks Agnew to go check out the teleportation equipment and figure out how it was working. Now, in the case of the chronovisors, I've actually broadcast, I've disseminated enough information about the chronovisors to actually cause someone to reinvent the wheel on that by revealing that the crystals that were in the crystal arrays through which an electromagnetic signal was being sent that was generating the holograms that were tuning in past and future events were made of element 83, which is bismuth. Now, somebody's going to take that information and start polishing bismuth crystals and start experimenting with sending an EM signal through them, and if not create the kind of elaborate hologram generating chronovisors that we had in the project, at least develop some very interesting knickknack for people's desks. Oh, you want to look at the Gettysburg Address? Well, let me tune it in. In other words, that's the critical information that somebody needs to know about the chronovisor. Start experimenting with sending an EM signal through bismuth crystals, 8 octagonal arrays of polished bismuth crystals, and you may find, for example, a past event popping up in your laboratory. So I don't make claims to having every last answer, every last fact about the technology, but what I've given is what I was able to perceive and remember and retrieve from memory, which is a description of the technologies, the people who were administering Project Pegasus, the origin, structure, and function of the technologies when I was told what they were, the project locations, and then my time travel experiences, to kind of give an overview of where we were in applied time-space physics by, let's say, 1970.
So have you ever conversed with other people who may actually have such a scientific skill base and skill set, whereby perhaps speaking with you might give them ideas or things that they can work with and experiment on?
Well, there are 4 principal time travel theorists in the world at the academic level. They are Dr. Michio Kaku, Dr. Stephen Hawking at Cambridge, Dr. David Darling at Oxford, Kaku, of course, from the City University of New York, and then Dr. Ronald Mallet, who I believe is at SUNY, one of the SUNY campuses, the State University of New York. Mallet doesn't believe me, and he's asked that he stated that in order for me to be deemed credible or just any kind of reliable witness, I have to proffer the technology because I'm making technical claims. And I'm sorry, but that doesn't pass evidential muster because direct testimony about eyewitness experience enters evidence as direct evidence. Somebody can say, yes, the bank robber was wearing a blue sweater. I'm saying, yes, I teleported from Curtis Wright in 1967-68. Okay. Now, Dr. Kaku is a little bit more interesting and complicated in terms of his background. I asked him before an appearance at the Committee to Bridge the Gap, which is an anti-war and anti-nuclear organization in West Los Angeles, in the early 80s, what he knew about advanced applications in quantum physics. When I was a student at UCLA, an undergraduate at UCLA, and I was being coy because I actually was remembering my time travel experiences, and I was trying to see if he knew anything about those secret projects. And he very kindly explained to me that after he was a conscientious objector who refused to engage in advanced weapons development with Dr. Edward Teller, in other words, when he refused to become essentially an acolyte of Teller, helping Teller develop even more destructive thermonuclear weapons, he was blacklisted and he was denied access to the defense community's files, the technologies and the records pertaining to advanced applications in quantum physics. But nonetheless, Dr. Kaku went on and became one of our leading theoreticians about time travel, somebody who was deemed credible enough to appear on the show American Perspectives on C-SPAN and state that my claims about Project Pegasus are quote-unquote fiction. They're not. They're science fact. I was an experiencer in an actual secret defense project where these devices were reduced to practice. So Mallet and Kaku are basically time travel skeptics who are hewing to the government line of, yes, we have no time travel. In a similar way, the Britons Hawking and Darling are so stuck, as Mallet is for that matter, in their Einsteinian notions of physics. And by the way, all 4 of them are totally unaware, apparently based on their statements and their public statements and writing, of Tesla's discovery of radiant energy. That it's like trying to ask somebody who's never encountered water what swimming is. They simply are out to lunch. And I'm accusing all 4 of them publicly, I've done so, of simply misinforming the public about time travel, because they're still talking about time travel as if it hasn't emerged yet. And they're arrogantly, none of them called me to interview me when I emerged publicly. Now, why is that?
Einstein once said, Andrew, that condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
Well, I think it's the height of arrogance, too. I mean, look at who I am. I'm an American lawyer who has practiced law for 16 years without a client complaint, much less an ethical charge. I'm a graduate of 2 of the finest universities in the world, the University of California at Los Angeles and the University of Cambridge in Cambridge, England. And I have everything to lose by making false claims in the public realm, including my law license, my reputation. And neither of those four time travel experts contacted me after I began to make it clear that I was talking about actual lived experiences rather than science fiction concepts. And so I think that what we have here is a situation where the brightest physicists that are being used as the leading lights of physics and that whose ideas are being used to stimulate the imagination of graduate physics students simply do not know what emerged secretly. If they could have stood in that lab at Curtis Wright and seen the energy that was propagated between the two armatures of the teleport.
Well, you know what, Andy, I've got this idea, right, and I've had Miran Tavakoli from the Kesh Foundation on, and he postulated some really wild evidence and theories about space and time and all of this kind of stuff, sent it to Stephen Hawking, and then Stephen Hawking said, no, it's BS, and then published it in one of his journals or something as his info. So these people at the top are simply the ones trying to keep us all down. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinny Eastwood Show. We're broadcasting live. I love AmericanFreedomRadio.com, namely because they've got a big enough network and a big enough audience so that when I interview somebody who's just so fracking fabulous, I just can't believe they're on my show, and I get to talk to them in my short period of life that I've gotten so far. But people actually also get to tune in and hear it, and it gets recorded and archived as well. Man, we're American Freedom Radio. We love you. We love you lots. My very special guest, Andy Basiago. We wanted to address the final question here. Maybe if we go on further, we'll have a little bit more. But safety. Is teleportation and or time travel actually a safe practice?
It probably is now, but let me just give a cautionary note here. When it was emergent, and I was teleporting frequently between New Jersey and New Mexico and back, sometimes stopping in Salon, Ohio, in cases where the Vortal Tunnel was collapsing and we needed to be decanted to the Swagelock Company headquarters in Solon, Ohio, to continue our journey east or west, depending on which direction we've been heading. It was a new, dangerous, and experimental technology. So during a briefing at the Cerrillos Cultural Center in spring of 1971 by the defense attaché to Project Pegasus, who had served as a Navy aviator and he was a congressman from the suburbs of Chicago, a man by the name of Donald Rumsfeld, who would go on and become Defense Secretary of the United States. In that meet and greet where he was lecturing about 15 of us young teleportees, he said there have been questions about medical side effects. And he said, thus far, we've only detected that the teleportation technology, being inside the tunnel, leads to substantial dehydration of the human body. And so all we can urge is that when you arrive here, and he also said, and you're arriving here in New Mexico, where the climate is by nature very arid. So all we can urge is to recognize that that's a factor, and that when you get here, we would urge you to take more trips to the water fountain and then more trips to the bathroom. He kind of made a joke about it. But what I had just witnessed outside in the hall was a child pulling the child in front of her out of the way. A girl pulled a boy out of the way because he was slaking his thirst for so long in the water fountain in front of her. We were all lined up slaking our thirst because we were severely dehydrated. Now, when I stayed in White Rock in the summer of 1973, teleporting there with my father during the fall of 71, I overheard a conversation with my father in which he was explaining to his friend Connie Chavez that I was being given, quote-unquote, a horse pill. This was this big pill I was taking in the morning. In fact, I learned how to bolt my vitamins and stuff, in one movement with this big pill that my dad was giving me at breakfast every morning. And I think that was to try to counter effect the dehydration. My dad was also giving me shots of vanadium with a hypodermic needle in the left calf And when I asked Dad, why are you giving me these shots? He said, to protect your teeth and bones from radiation. Now, relative to the health effects of the children involved in the program, I met in Santa Fe in June of 2003 with a number of intelligence officials who were helping me uncover the truth of what had happened to me. And one of those was Jack Pruitt, Carl Jack Pruitt of the U.S. Navy, who had been one of the team leaders on Project Pegasus, and he went on to become the research director of Project Montauk. He's a real person. My dad and I first met Jack in summer of 1967, and my last meeting with him was during this June 2003 clandestine meeting in the old Sweeney Auditorium in Santa Fe that has since been torn down. But Jack told me that the dehydration effects of the teleportation had evolved among the grown-up child teleportees into a disease that mimics diabetes. In other words, the mechanism that was creating the vortal tunnels had affected the mechanisms inside the human body that regulate metabolism. And some of the teleportees were becoming very, very obese, including his son Glenn, who at that time was 700 pounds, and several years later would die of congestive heart disease and pulmonary edema. So there was an issue of a disruption in blood sugar metabolism. And so many of the child teleportees have high blood glucose levels. I myself do. I also have some problem with dehydration, but then again, I took that acne medication that was causing dehydration. It escapes me now. The acne medication that came out in the early 80s. So I have several reasons to be dehydrated, but I'm pretty much chronically dehydrated. That's why sometimes you'll hear me coughing. It's actually the upper part of my lungs and throat becoming dehydrated. Among the adult teleportees who teleported with more rigid tissues than children, there was some development of heart valve defects because, for example, in the case of my father, the flaps of his mitral valve actually, I guess when they were sort of vibrating in the vortal tunnel, kind of fused together into kind of a butterfly shape. So there was also the risk that if you teleported into water, the specific gravity of water is greater than the specific gravity of the air. And in one instance, one of the boys that I teleported with lost his feet. His feet were basically sheared off at the ankle because he's cleanly slid off his ankles when he teleported into a public fountain that had about 3 inches of water in it when I was on the project. And I witnessed that grave tragedy and his suffering, and that was also one of the things that motivated me to speak out. I figured that if a group of American school children could risk death and dismemberment bravely participating in the development of teleportation, it should be made safe and used to advantage humanity in the 21st century. So those are the known risks going back to the project days, but it's my belief that teleportation is being used secretly inside the U.S. government, for example, to move the president, the vice president, their family members, and other high officials between U.S. military bases around the world, and that I believe that it has probably been made safe. I would say that all forms of transport involve risk. If you cross a stream, you can drown. If you walk between one city and another, you can perish from hunger or thirst or animal attack, or be robbed, assaulted by criminals before you reach your destination. And contemporary forms of travel, like automobile and air travel, involve regular levels of death as a result of accidents. So I think we would have to weigh the efficacy of perhaps the supplements people could take if they were regular teleporters against the accident rate for conventional forms of transport. It's my position that automobile traffic should be obviated because it involves too high of a risk. Every year in the United States, 50,000 people lose their lives and 300,000 people are injured, which is the rate of death and injury that occurred during the entire 13 years of the Vietnam conflict. So the United States, in continuing to rely on automobiles for much of our transport, both local and long distance, is incurring an accident rate in a given year that is the entire human carnage that our country experienced during the Vietnam War. So I believe that we should use that as a base point, as our means of evaluating whether the the potential side effects of teleporting are serious enough to not introduce teleportation for anything but moving inanimate goods. I think, but I think it has been made safe, because I do believe it was made safe, and that I was actually one of the human medical experimentees who was used to, in some way, to create that data, to figure out how to make it safe. But I believe it was ultimately made safe decades ago.
Okay, so time travel. Oh, sorry. Keep mixing up the time travel and teleportation. I mean, same principle behind it, though, isn't it?
Well, not all teleportation is time travel, because you can teleport in real time, and not all time travel is teleportation, because there are other technologies that we can use to bodily time travel. Sort of a Venn diagram, they sort of overlap.
Well, where I was going with this is that, you know how some people are afraid of flying, and you tell them, hey, look, man, statistically speaking, you're far more likely to die in a car crash than you are to go down in a plane. So they're like, oh, okay, sweet as, I'll go on the plane then. That's not that bad, I guess. Now you can say something, I'm really, really afraid about time travel and being cut off at the ankles. And you say, well, man, statistically speaking, you're far more likely to die in a plane crash than you are to die in a teleportation mishap.
And it goes to not just being in the air, because most aviation casualties are burn victims who are killed or injured on the ground, like when a commercial airliner is struck by another commercial airliner at the airport. So really that goes to the obsolescent nature of air travel. You're basically, as we found out on 9/11, a commercial airliner is a flying fuel bomb explosive device until the fuel gets spent as you near your destination. And then some commercial aviators actually drop their fuel and begin subjecting the civilian population below to all kinds of autoimmune diseases, from arthritis to fibromyalgia to lupus, dropping all that kerosene in an aerosolized fashion over our heads. So air traffic, commercial air travel is not safe. There's the risk of blood clots, birth defects, miscarriages, cardiac and pulmonary embolisms, and nonetheless, it is an order of magnitude or two more safe than automobile transport, but teleportation will be even more safe.
Andrew, thank you very much. And your website's projectpegasus.com, is that correct?
My time travel website is projectpegasus.net.
Projectpegasus.net. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you can check all that out. And there will be archives posted of this show at AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the VinnyEastwoodShow.com archives. You can it just says all shows are archived here. You just click on that button and we'll have those up for you as soon as humanly possible, as well as up on the YouTube channel, Mr. News, Guerrilla Media. That's Mr. News, like, hello, I'm Mr. News. Guerrilla Media, gorilla like a soldier, not like a rather large ape, although I am 6'4" and we have that tendency. Andy, thank you very much. And we'll see you again sometime, ladies and gentlemen, at the VinnyEastwoodShow.com.
If you take an active interest in maintaining the optimum health and well-being of yourself and your family, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is the magazine you've been waiting for. Having taken Australia and New Zealand by storm, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is now available in the UK and Europe. Visit www.nznaturalmed.co.uk or call 01626 337 531 to order your copy now.
Do you realise every day we are being put under constant stress from wireless radiation? What's worse is that you don't even know that it's happening. It puts as much stress on our body as if we had a constant viral infection, draining our energy and sapping our strength, or just making us irritable and fatigued. These wireless fields are being emitted from computers, microwaves, mobile phones, power lines, and any electrical appliance. Now there is a solution. A group of research engineers in New Zealand have come up with an active shielding device that shields you from wireless radiation at a cellular level. Blue Shield comes in 3 models: a household, portable, and USB that plugs into any computer. The great thing about Blue Shield is it is very affordable and guaranteed to last. A one-off purchase will see you being protected for years to come. Visit AmericanFreedomRadio.com and click on the Blue Shield banner. Blue Shield, brought to you by the Vinny Eastwood Show.com.
No matter where you live, globalism affects you. Did you know that the Vinny Eastwood Show has more subscribers than New Zealand Herald TV and is New Zealand's most popular YouTube news channel, where warm-hearted humour and a list of awesome guests talk about crucial issues which the mainstream media ignore? A show where you, the listener, can phone up with questions, comments and suggestions of guests. Vinny is building a hub to connect truthers with raw information they need to become active. He can help you gain further skills such as website building, producing audio and video, and creating revenue streams in your own multimedia environment. Because Vinny supports such a wide range of people in the truth movement, he is not government or corporate backed and relies entirely on your donations. Give now, give generously, or subscribe for $10 a month for access to ad-free video archives. Just visit the VinnyEastwoodShow.com and click donate.
Interventions in a past event that are launched from a time traveler coming from the future is that those interventions occur in real time in the present of the past event that we're visiting and become part of the past that existed when we left the future to make that nonlinear transept back to that location on the linear timeline. So that's why I say that you can't go back to change the past, you can't, or a past event scenario, you can only go back to fulfill it. Right? Because it happened when the past was the present. It's in the time-space continuum. Okay, so the notion of a redo, I actually am...
You listen to the Vinny Eastwood Show. The somewhat operatic 2 hours of talk radio right here on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And as I mentioned earlier, please download those Android and iPhone apps. And if you can, email American Freedom Radio at ymail.com if you want to volunteer at the network, or if you wish to give them a donation for all the work that they do here, keeping the engines running. You know, do it now. American Freedom Radio at...
I've been defending this position because it's what I was experiencing in the program. I lost a major lecture date recently because my host wanted me to talk about the redo concept. You can't redo the past. You can influence past events, however. So, for example, when I was sent to Gettysburg on November 19th of 1863 from a time lab in East Hanover, New Jersey in the spring of 1972, to have the privilege of seeing Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address, which I ended up screwing up, and I didn't see Mr. Lincoln on that time probe, nor his address. I was there the day Lincoln was there because that's the day they sent me to via a technology called plasma confinement. Okay, so
ymail.com. They need your help actually at this particular point in time a lot more than I particularly do. So if you're going to donate to either one of us, but you can't pick which, pick American Freedom Radio. I'm serious about that. Andy Basiago is my guest, and we had 2 questions in the chat room that I would like you to address. Firstly, how does the time travel technology or teleportation technology actually work? And 2, is it dangerous? Like, are there associated health effects? Because there's a simple a film come out recently called Looper. I don't know if you've heard this or seen it, but it's relatively interesting how they use time travel technology, the criminal element in the future, use time travel technology in order to send people who they're knocking off, whacking as it were, back in time to be executed in the past, and their bodies burned and completely disappeared. It's the perfect crime.
Well, the second part of your question goes to the redo involving of a timeline involving time travel from the future to the past. So let me just quickly address that first in light of Looper. Based on everything I experienced in Project Pegasus with different times of time travel, the cardinal principle we have to remember about